My name is Karen. I am 27, and I never imagined that one sentence would echo in my mind the way my mother's voice did that afternoon. I was sitting quietly with my laptop, focused on the work that kept my life running smoothly, when her shout tore through the hallway like a storm breaking a window. "You are banned from our dinner. You pretentious fanatic." Those words were not a surprise anymore, but they still carried a sting. I looked up from the screen, calm, steady, because losing my balance would only feed the laughter around her. They were all there in the living room, my relatives, leaning back on the sofa as if they were watching a comedy, amused by the idea that I, someone who worked constantly, someone who built her own life, was nothing more than a nuisance to them. The truth is that I had spent years listening to the same remarks. They called me distant because I dedicated myself to building something stable. They said I was arrogant because I did not spend my days asking for approval. They joked that I acted superior simply because I chose a quiet life instead of joining their arguments. What they never understood is that I never believed myself superior. I simply learned to live without depending on people who only knew how to criticize. That day, though, something shifted. My mother's insult was not just a casual spark. It was a match thrown into an old box of dry wood. The looks on their faces told me exactly what they expected. That I would plead, that I would explain myself, that I would try to join them and pretend everything was normal. But I did not need their table to feel whole. I did not need their approval to breathe peacefully. So I closed my laptop gently, stood up with composure, and said nothing. Silence can be louder than any argument. Their eyes followed me as if waiting for a reaction, a breakdown, a crack in my calm. But instead, they got something they never expected: indifference. Inside, my thoughts were steady. If they want distance, they will feel it. And they did. While I walked away, I felt the strange mix of sadness and freedom that comes when someone finally stops forcing a place where they were never welcomed. I made my own plans that evening, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. They ignored everything I had done for years. Things they never saw, bills they never knew about, responsibilities I carried quietly because I thought family meant helping even when unrecognized. But life has a way of turning the table without loud announcements. Their celebration, so proudly prepared, did not survive the very things they always assumed would magically take care of themselves. When the warmth of the dinner they had flaunted began to crumble and their comfort collapsed, my phone lit up repeatedly, not with one call, not with two, but with 67 desperate attempts to reach me. And that, dear listener, is where this story truly begins. If you want to hear everything that unfolded, the shock, the lessons, and the turn life took, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what you would do if your own family treated you this way. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. I spent the rest of that evening in a quiet corner of my apartment, letting the calm settle over me like a warm blanket. There is a peace that comes when a person stops trying to belong where they are only tolerated. I made myself a simple meal, nothing elaborate, just enough to remind me that even small comforts can feel like a victory. As I ate, I thought about how quickly things had changed, how a single shout from my mother had pushed me toward a decision I should have made long ago. The next morning, I woke with a surprising lightness. I opened the curtains and watched the soft daylight spread across the room. For the first time in months, I did not feel the heaviness of obligation pulling at me. My mind was clear, ready to start the day without walking on eggshells. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and returned to the work that kept my life moving forward. While the outside world enjoyed its festive preparations, I focused on my projects with the kind of patience that comes from knowing you no longer owe explanations to those who mock your efforts. Around midday, a message arrived from my cousin Sarah. She was one of the few relatives who tried to treat me with kindness, even if she often followed whatever the rest of the family decided. Her message read, "Karen, are you really not coming to the dinner?" I looked at the phone for a moment before answering. "Your mother made it clear that I am not welcome." Sarah replied quickly, "I tried telling them it was too harsh. They won't listen." I could almost hear the frustration in her voice. Still, I wrote back a simple, "It's all right. I will be fine." That afternoon, I went for a long walk. The streets were filled with lights and decorations, families shopping together, children pointing at window displays. I watched them with quiet appreciation, not envy, just a reminder that peace does not always arrive wrapped in celebration. Sometimes it arrives in the form of solitude, steady and silent. As I walked, I repeated to myself something an older neighbor once told me. Not all families are built on warmth, but you can build your own piece of warmth wherever you stand. The truth of that phrase felt deeper now. When the day of their dinner finally arrived, I felt no bitterness. I made myself a pot of tea, put on comfortable clothes, and allowed the evening to unfold like any other. While they gathered around their table, laughing and pretending everything was perfect, I sat in my small living room reading a book I had put aside for far too long. Every now and then, a distant sense of relief washed through me. I had spent years chasing acceptance from people who offered none. Now I was learning to let that go. As the hours passed, I had no idea that their perfect celebration was already beginning to crack. I did not know that the bills I had been quietly handling were now sitting unpaid. I did not imagine that their comfort depended on more than they realized. And I certainly did not expect that very soon my phone would begin ringing again. This time not with insults, but with something entirely different. The following morning began like any other, calm and unhurried. I made tea, opened the windows to let in the gentle breeze, and prepared myself for another quiet day of work. The silence of my apartment felt comforting, steady, something I could trust. I turned on my laptop, ready to continue the project I had been developing for months. It was honest work, steady work, the kind that demanded focus and discipline. And for a while, everything flowed easily. But by mid-morning, my phone vibrated once, then again, then again. I frowned, reached for it, and saw a list of missed calls. I recognized the number immediately, my mother's house, a place that only a day earlier had no room for me at its table. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it might be a pocket dial, or perhaps someone from the family trying to convince me, with false sweetness, to attend a gathering I had already been pushed away from. A few minutes later, it rang once more. I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. This time I placed the phone face down on the table and took a slow breath. Experience had taught me that too much attention only encouraged turmoil. I chose to continue my work, keeping my mind steady. But the calls persisted like knocking at a door on a stormy night. After the fifth attempt, I finally answered. "Karen, something is wrong here." My mother's voice trembled, not with anger, but with something unfamiliar, worry. I kept my tone calm. "What happened?" She hesitated. I could hear voices in the background, hushed and tense. "The electricity company called. They said the payment didn't go through, and the heating bill hasn't been handled either. Your father is furious. We don't know what's going on." I knew exactly what was going on. For years, quietly and without acknowledgement, I had been the one keeping their household running. While they mocked me, dismissed my efforts, or pointed fingers in judgment, I was the person paying bills in silence so they wouldn't lose their comfort. Not out of obligation, but out of a long-standing hope that kindness might one day soften them. But last night had changed everything. Their words had been final. Their rejection had been clear. "I see," I answered simply. My tone held no anger, only clarity. Mother continued, "Can you check? Perhaps you forgot something." It took strength, not bitterness, but strength to say, "I did not forget." I stopped handling it. There was a long silence. I could almost picture the shock spreading across the room like cold water. Someone behind her whispered, "She stopped? What does she mean stopped?" Another voice muttered, "This can't be real." Then my mother's voice returned, softer, almost pleading. "Karen, we need your help." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "Yesterday you told me I was banned. Those were your words." "I didn't mean it like that," she rushed out. But I remembered her tone, her laughter, the way the others smiled behind her like an audience enjoying a performance. "Whether you meant it or not, you said it," I replied. Before she could answer, the line disconnected, not abruptly, but as if she simply had no words left. I placed the phone down, letting the quiet fill the room once more. Little did I know that this would only be the beginning. Soon the calls would multiply, dozens upon dozens, each more desperate than the last. By the afternoon, the silence in my apartment had turned into an unexpected companion. I tried to return to my work, but my phone began to vibrate again, first every few minutes, then every few breaths. My screen filled with the same caller ID over and over. My mother, my father, my sister, even relatives who rarely acknowledged my existence were suddenly reaching out. I let the device ring on the table, its vibration humming like a restless insect. After everything that had been said to me, after years of mockery and dismissal, it felt strange to see their sudden desperation. A part of me wanted to ignore every call. Another part felt the pull of old habits, the instinct to solve, to fix, to carry burdens that were never mine to begin with. It wasn't until a message from Sarah arrived that I finally looked at the phone again. "Karen, things are getting bad here. They're arguing. The gas company came to the door. I think they're scared." I stared at the message for a long moment, not because I felt satisfaction, though admittedly there was a hint of poetic justice, but because I realized how fragile their world had been without me even noticing. They had built their comfort on the belief that someone, somewhere, would always patch the holes for them. They never once imagined that person would stop. I took a deep breath and sent her a response. "I understand." Almost immediately she called. "Karen," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Your mother is in the kitchen crying. Your father can't make sense of the bills. Your sister keeps saying it's your fault, but, well, you know how she is." I answered calmly, "It's not my responsibility anymore." "I know," Sarah whispered, "but they're falling apart." Her words echoed inside me. I walked slowly to the window, watching the afternoon light settle on the buildings across the street. I wasn't heartless. I felt sympathy, but sympathy is not the same as surrender. "Sarah," I said gently, "you saw what happened yesterday." They pushed me out with laughter. They didn't think of me then. "I know," she repeated, a little heavier this time. I thought you should know what's happening." After we ended the call, I sat on the edge of my couch, letting my thoughts untangle. I remembered every holiday, every family dinner where I sat quietly while they made comments about my work, my routine, my choices. I remembered the times I paid what they could not and received nothing but silence in return. And now, suddenly I was the pillar they needed, the one they had thrown stones at. Around early evening, spoken, not numbered, my phone rang again. This time I answered. My mother's voice trembled. "Karen, please talk to us." "I'm listening," I said. "We didn't know things would turn out this way," she whispered. "We thought everything was under control." "Because I kept it under control," I replied, not harshly but truthfully. There was a pause, then a soft, fragile question. "Can you come home?" I looked around my apartment, a place of peace, stability, and quiet strength. "Not tonight," I said. That truth lingered between us like a curtain slowly falling. But fate wasn't done yet, because later that night, the knock on my door would change everything. The knock came softly at first, like someone testing whether they truly wanted to be heard. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of tea, when it echoed again, firmer, more insistent this time. For a moment, I froze. No one ever came to my apartment unannounced. My life was quiet, organized, protected from the chaos that usually accompanied family matters. I placed the cup down and walked toward the door with calm, careful steps. When I opened it, the sight before me made me inhale sharply. It was my father. He stood there with a coat thrown over his shoulders, not buttoned properly, as if he had rushed out without thinking. His eyes looked tired in a way I had never seen before. He had always been the proud one, the loud one, the one who refused to show weakness. Yet now he looked almost unsure, as if he wasn't certain I would even allow him to stand there. "Karen," he said, clearing his throat, "may I come in for a moment?" The old version of me, the one who always softened, who always opened the door before thinking, would have stepped aside immediately. But today, I kept my hand on the door for an extra heartbeat, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. Then I nodded and stepped aside just enough for him to walk in. He looked around the living room with a mix of discomfort and recognition. "It's peaceful here," he said quietly. "It is," I replied, taking a seat on the edge of the couch. He sat opposite me, folding his hands as if preparing himself for a difficult conversation. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, but not hostile, just honest. Finally, he exhaled. "Your mother, your sister, they don't know how to talk to you. They speak without thinking. They assume everything will somehow fix itself." I listened without interrupting. He continued, "But I knew, Karen. I knew you were the one keeping things afloat." That admission surprised me. "You knew." He nodded slowly, not fully, but I noticed the bills stopped arriving in my mailbox. I noticed the things that were taken care of without my asking. I chose not to question it. I held his gaze, and when they threw me out of the dinner, he lowered his eyes. I should have stopped them. I didn't. That was my failure. His voice cracked slightly, not dramatically, not theatrically, but in a way that revealed a man finally facing his own flaws. For the first time in years, he was not acting like the head of the family. He was just a father trying to understand the daughter he had pushed aside. "Karen," he said softly, "we need your help. But more than that, we need to make things right. I came here because I didn't want you to hear only desperate voices through the phone." I took a long breath. "I don't want to be treated like a tool people use in silence." "You're not," he said. "Or at least you shouldn't be." His sincerity touched something inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of something that resembled truth. Then, almost as if the universe wanted to test both of us, a sudden noise echoed from the hallway. Footsteps, hurried ones. A moment later, someone else knocked on the door, louder than before. My father and I turned at the same time. And when I opened it, what I saw made my heart stop for a beat. Standing at my door was my mother, breathless, wrapped in a coat that looked hastily thrown on, her hair pinned back unevenly as if she had left the house in a rush. Behind her, my sister hovered with crossed arms and an expression caught somewhere between irritation and panic. It was the most unusual trio I had ever seen on my doorstep. My mother stepped forward first. "Karen, please, we need to talk." I didn't move. I simply looked at her, waiting. She swallowed hard, her voice unsteady. "The heating shut off an hour ago. The house is freezing. And the electricity company, they said they can't guarantee anything until payment is made." My sister muttered, "This is ridiculous. Why can't you just fix it like you always do?" Her tone snapped something inside me, not anger, but clarity. I looked directly at her, because I am not always anymore. I stopped being your invisible worker. My mother nudged her sharply, then turned back to me. "Please don't listen to her. We're overwhelmed. We didn't realize how much you were handling." My father rose from the couch and slowly approached the doorway. "Karen, we came here because, well, pride won't solve this, and shouting certainly hasn't." The three stood before me, flawed, frightened, finally understanding the consequences of their own neglect. For a moment, I simply breathed, letting years of tension settle into something quieter. "I will help," I said, watching their shoulders drop with relief. "But only if things change. I won't be treated as an outsider in my own family." My mother nodded quickly. "They will change. I promise." I stepped aside and gestured for them to come in. As they entered, awkward, humbled, uncertain, I knew this night would mark the beginning of a shift none of us had expected. Once they were inside, the air felt heavier, not tense, but full of the unspoken truths that had been waiting far too long. I guided them to the living room. My father sat carefully, my mother kept wringing her hands, and my sister stood by the wall as if the sofa might bite her. I opened my laptop and placed it on the table. "Before anything else," I said calmly, "you need to understand what I've been doing all these years." My mother nodded, her eyes following my every movement. I pulled up folders, organized records of bills, payments, reminders, schedules, all of it neatly arranged, all of it done by me. My father leaned forward. "You handled all of that alone?" "Yes," I answered, while being mocked for working too much, while being dismissed as distant, while being thrown out of dinners. My sister shifted uncomfortably. For the first time that evening, her voice softened. I didn't know it was this much. "You never asked," I replied. "None of you did." Silence settled over the room, the kind that forces reflection. My mother's eyes glistened, the weight of realization finally reaching her. "Karen, we thought you wanted distance. We assumed you preferred your own world." "I wanted respect," I said softly, "and a place where I wasn't treated like a burden." My father exhaled deeply. "Tell us what needs to be done now. We'll follow your guidance." I began explaining the overdue bills, the steps needed to restore their services, and how they could organize themselves going forward. To my surprise, they listened, truly listened, without interrupting, without dismissing my words. As I finished, my mother reached out and took my hand. "We failed you," she whispered, "but let us try again." I hesitated, then allowed her fingers to close around mine. The next morning, we all returned to their house together. The place felt strangely quiet, stripped of its usual confidence. My mother followed my instructions step by step, calling the companies, settling the overdue balances, and arranging new automatic payments. My father organized documents he had ignored for years, while my sister helped gather everything that needed updating. There was no shouting, no accusations, only a slow, humble effort to rebuild what had been neglected. When everything was finally in order and the lights hummed back to life, my mother turned to me with a timid smile. "Karen, thank you. Not just for today, but for all the years we didn't see you." My father placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You kept us standing. Now it's our turn to stand with you." My sister approached last, awkward but sincere. "I'm sorry for treating you the way I did. I thought you were cold. I didn't know you were carrying all of us." I breathed in deeply, letting their words settle. What matters now is that things change. Respect goes both ways. And for the first time in a long while, I believe they meant it. We sat together, quietly, sharing a warmth no dinner had ever managed to create.